Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivadadhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivadadhari. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivadadhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivadadhari. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye. Can we get more air in here? What? So tonight, let's look into the realm of pure consciousness. Because, as I mentioned in a class a couple of days ago, our duty as sadhakas, practitioners of bhakti, in clinical terms is attention management, how you manage your attention. There's an unlimited variety of things that we can think of. And because of the impressions that I've already taken in, the impressions that I've already gathered, not just in this life, but in previous lives, I have a number of options that present themselves to me through my mind continually. And Krishna asks the practitioner of bhakti, or more he recommends, that we become very specific in the way we focus our consciousness throughout the day. And by understanding, first of all, how we have the capability of managing our own attention, we must have this confidence, first of all, that we have the capability of actually being an agent for change. And the main way that we'll change our life is by properly managing our attention, where we place our attention throughout the day. That's our duty. And we can understand from Krishna's teachings in the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita that there is a hierarchy starting with the senses. The senses, as Prahlad Maharaj mentions in his prayers to Lord Nrsingadev, have a mind of their own, interestingly enough. Each one has its own way of working. If you've ever noticed that when you're hungry, when it gets closer to lunchtime, the demand becomes stronger. And the stomach simply demands, feed me now, it's time. And where's that coming from? It's coming from the command center of the stomach. And each one of the senses has its own demands. And when it interacts with the outside world, when the indriyas, the senses, interact with their objects in the outside world, they have their own attraction, naturally, which has been developed. We are tethered to this material world through our senses, through the attachment of the senses to their objects. And Krishna says, to help us in this attention management scheme, that we should understand that the senses are the lowest of all. And above the senses is the mind, which is the repository for all kinds of ideas. We heard this from the 2nd chapter of Bhagavad Gita the other day, when Krishna described the mind as a factory of ideas. And then there's the intelligence that's above the mind. And above the mind is the soul. And overseeing the whole thing is Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as the Paramatma. I wrote down something that might be helpful today. just a phrase, and that is that Krishna is committed to respecting everyone's free will. So we have to keep that in mind also. He'll help us. He's unlimitedly helpful, but he's also committed to respecting our free will. Therefore, we have to exercise our free will in a proper way. And this is the essence of how to move forward in life, is to gain this impetus, one way or the other, through good association, through hearing from the Shastra, which is also good association, from associating with devotees and so forth, and gaining this conviction that it's in my best interest to manage my attention in a certain way. And the best way is what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. This is the ultimate way to manage your attention. Krishna says, Manmana bhavamad bhakto. Think of me. How to think of Krishna. How to focus one's attention on Krishna. And when one does that, one has reached the pinnacle of proper focus. So, I'm going to read a purport from the third canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, which will give us some impetus to manage our attention in ways that will help us advance in spiritual life. And this is 3.6.36. How is everybody already tonight? I know, you are great. You're all great souls. Tatapi kirtayam yanga yatamati yatashutam kirtim hare swam satkartum giram anya bidasata Giram anya bidasatim tata. Therefore, api, although it is so, kirtayami, I do describe, anga, ovidura, yata, as much as, mati, intelligence, yata, as much as, shrutam, heard, kirtim, glories, harehe, of the Lord, swam, own, satkartum, just purify, giram, speeches, anyabida, otherwise, asatim, unchaste. In spite of my inability, whatever I have been able to hear from the spiritual master, and whatever I could assimilate, I am now describing in glorification of the Lord by pure speech, for otherwise my power of speaking would remain unchaste. Purport. The purification of the conditioned soul necessitates purification of his consciousness. By the presence of consciousness, the presence of the transcendental soul is verified. And as soon as consciousness leaves the body, the material body is not active. Consciousness is perceived, therefore, by activities. The theory put forward by empiric philosophers that consciousness can remain in an inactive state is the proof of their poor fund of knowledge. One should not become unchaste by stopping the activities of pure consciousness. One should not become unchaste by stopping the activities of pure consciousness. If the activities of pure consciousness are stopped, certainly the conscious living force will be otherwise engaged, because unless engaged, the consciousness has no standing. Consciousness cannot be silent even for a moment. When the body does not act, the consciousness acts in the form of dreams. Unconsciousness is artificial. By induced extraneous help, it remains for a limited period, but when the intoxication of the drug is finished, or when one is awake, the consciousness again acts earnestly. Maitreya's statement is that in order to avoid unchaste conscious activities, he was trying to describe the unlimited glories of the Lord, although he did not have the ability to describe them perfectly. This glorification of the Lord is not a product of research, but the result of hearing submissively from the authority of the spiritual master. It is also not possible to repeat all that one has heard from his spiritual master, but one can narrate as far as possible by one's honest endeavor. It does not matter whether the Lord's glories are fully explained or not. One must attempt to engage one's bodily, mental, and verbal activities in the transcendental glorification of the Lord. Otherwise, such activities will remain unchaste and impure. The existence of the conditioned soul can be purified only by the method of engaging mind and speech in the service of the Lord. The Tridandi sannyasi of the Vaishnava school accepts 3 rods representing the vow to engage in the service of the Lord with body, mind, and speech, whereas the Ekadandi sannyasi takes the vow to become one with the Supreme. Since the Lord is absolute, there is no distinction between him and his glories. The glories of the Lord, as chanted by the Vaishnava sannyasi, are as substantial as the Lord himself. And thus, while glorifying the Lord, the devotee becomes one with him in transcendental interest, although he remains eternally a transcendental servitor. This simultaneously one and different position of the devotee makes him eternally purified, and thus his life becomes a complete success. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Dena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadahmayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvetam Sadvatutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhupya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Go Premanande Hari Hari Bo. I'd like to mention more about, not only what I like to, I'm going to, Krishna willing. This specific section of the purport in which Srila Prabhupada writes, one should not become unchaste by stopping the activities of pure consciousness. This is something very practical because we're practicing yoga. And yoga means to remain connected to Krishna. And this connection is maintained by consciousness. We're not separated from Krishna by distance. But the Sri Upanishad says, Tarejati tanaijati tadure tadvantike tarantarasya sarvasya taru sarvasya bhayata. The Supreme Lord walks and he does not walk. He is far away, but he is very near as well. He is within everything, and yet he's outside of everything. Is it especially dark in here? Can we have more light? Is it possible? And what about this verse? It's that Krishna is the closest one to us. He is not far away, although it says he's far away, but he's separated from us by consciousness. And the way that we attain happiness in this life, or in any life, is through consciousness. Happiness is consciousness. Happiness means purified consciousness. It doesn't mean proximity to the objects of the senses. It has nothing to do with our external environment. This is a good place to start. And in fact, the Srimad Bhagavatam mentions that for devotees who are in this consciousness of Narayana Parayana, they're fixed on pure service to Krishna. Narayana Paraksarvena Kutaschana Pibhyati Swarga Pavarga Narakeshu Apitulyarta Darshana. It's equal to them whether they're in heaven or hell. Imagine that. Doesn't matter the external circumstance. You can be in a heavenly situation or in a hellish situation, but if you're Narayana Parayana, you're there for Krishna's service, and you're connected to him through consciousness, you'll be happy. I was once stuck in China with Satyadev in one of the worst hotels I've ever been in. Our host just happened to be a very thrifty person and put us up in a real dive. And it turned out that we had to stay in there because there was a way in which there was some indication that if we went to the program, we'd be arrested and thrown in jail. So we didn't feel like going there that day or the next day or the day after. And we ended up having to stay inside this dive of a hotel. And however, at the same time, because I had Satyadev Prabhu's association, and we were there for a particular mission, we weren't there to enjoy ourselves, although there was spiritual enjoyment from going on the mission. I could tolerate that environment quite nicely. And on the other hand, even if I was, and I've had this situation, go to a heavenly place, but without the connection to service there, I felt quite out of place and not very happy at all. When Chanakya Pandit said, don't travel anywhere where there's no Ganges River and there's no devotees or no temple. Otherwise you'll be sorely disappointed, even if it's a heavenly place. So our surroundings are not it. It's our consciousness that determines whether we're happy or not. And our constitutional position of happiness is to have chaste consciousness. And therefore, Prabhupada makes this profound statement. One should not become unchaste by stopping the activities of pure consciousness. That means we have some choice to continue it. That's our job. That's what we do as sadhakas, is we endeavor in all circumstances, in all environments, to keep the activities of pure consciousness going. So, what is unchaste consciousness? There are various ways in which the Shastra tells us about certain mentalities that are unchaste. And one of them is very practical that Krishna mentions in the Bhagavad Gita, in which, if you'll give me a Bhagavad Gita, I'll read to you. You'll find it in the second chapter, where Krishna says, Karman yevadikaraste mapalishu kadachana. Makarma pala hetubur nate sangos to karmani. And that is, does anybody know this verse? Everybody knows this verse, right? Because if you ask anybody in India, what's the Bhagavad Gita? Look up the verse, Karman yevadikaravas. What's the Bhagavad Gita about? People will say, just do your work. It's like, well, that's the shortest purport to Bhagavad Gita I've ever heard. What's the rest of it? The rest of it is, Karman yevarikaraste, yes, you have a right to do your work, your prescribed duty, Ma palishu kadachana. Kadachana means at any time, ma palishu, that you don't get to keep the fruit. You shouldn't be expecting it, and you shouldn't be attached to it in any way, the fruit of your work. Ma karma pala hetu abur, because if you become attached to you attach yourself to the result, then you also become entangled in the work itself. You become the cause of the work. And if you don't attach yourself to it, you're doing non-reactive work. And then finally, Krishna says, mate sango strakarmani, never be attached to not doing your duty. So it means you can't stop doing your duty, and you should keep doing your duty, but at the same time, you shouldn't be attached to the result of your work at all. How does that sit with everybody? Just fine, right? No? Yes, it does. Listen, here's the translation. This is 242 in the Bhagavad Gita. You have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but you are not entitled to the fruits of action. Never consider yourself the cause of the results of your activities, and never be attached to not doing your duty. So now we're about to enter into a practical realm of how to maintain chaste consciousness. How to keep the consciousness chaste. Okay, here it is. There are three considerations here: prescribed duties, capricious work, and inaction. Prescribed duties are activities enjoined in terms of one's acquired modes of material nature. Capricious work means actions without the sanction of authority, and inaction means not performing one's prescribed duties. Is that clear? What are the three? Somebody take a microphone and read it back and say it back. Don't read it, say it. Let's get it in the forefront of our consciousness. He's offering three options here. What are the three options of working in the world? It's practical. We have to work, right? So, what are the three options?
Prescribed duties is the first one.
Yes.
Capricious work is the second one, and inaction is the third one.
So what does it mean, capricious work?
Doing activities which are not authorized by the authority.
And what about the first one?
Prescribed duties are duties that one performs from the mode of nature he has acquired.
And how do you know they're prescribed? Who prescribes them?
Authority.
Who's your authority?
Scriptures, sadhu sangha, sadhu, shastra, and guru.
Okay, so you got to be lined up, right? Know what your prescribed duty is, and then what's the third option?
Inaction.
Not doing anything. That's kind of painful. Inaction. In fact, even when people are out of work, even if they hate their work, it's harder not being in some kind of job. You see people working, and you go, God, I wish I could at least rake some leaves or something. Anyway, I'll continue. The Lord advised that Arjuna not be inactive, but that he perform his prescribed duty without being attached to the result. So that's an option, and it's recommended by Krishna. He told Arjuna, who wanted to stop doing his duty, his prescribed duty was that he was supposed to fight the battle at Kurukshetra. I mean, it was all lined up that he should fight. He was the person who would lead the battle, in fact, and then he wanted to give it up. And Krishna says, well, first of all, you can't give it up. But then second of all, he said, do it, but don't be attached to the result. So that's a practical application of maintaining pure consciousness. It's practical, because you have to work. We find ourselves in a situation where we have to work. Yes or yes? Yeah, and you can't stop doing your work, because Krishna says in the 3rd chapter of the Gita, Karma Yoga, that you can't even maintain your physical body without work. So and we can't remain inactive. You're going to work somewhere. But he gives this other aspect of work, which is counterintuitive to what everybody else is thinking in the material world practically, and that is, don't be attached to the results of your work. That's something new. Okay, one who is attached to the result of his work is also the cause of the action. I'm going to say it again. One who is attached to the result of his work is also the cause of the action. Thus, he is the enjoyer or sufferer of the result of such actions. Any feedback on that?
I was just thinking it's very difficult to not be the enjoyer of the work. So that sentence seems to be, because we are always attached to the result of the work, so we become the cause. But I'm just thinking, can we do something without being attachment? So then you have to be at a very high level of consciousness in your spiritual life. Otherwise,
actually, this is entry level. Entry level. It's not so difficult. Not so difficult. It's a matter of dedicating oneself to the life of pure consciousness. Start with the premise that the sadhana, the practice is to maintain pure consciousness, not to become asati, unchaste, or unreal. And if one has this philosophical framework, at least, and one's working, then even if you find yourself initially attached, you can invoke the instructions of Krishna and philosophically detach yourself from the fruit of the work. Look at it carefully and see where did it come from, who is the cause of the result, and also consider the fact that if I claim ownership over this, then I also have to take the result of it. And what are the implications of that? Remember, we talked earlier in another class about deliberation. And one of the aspects of deliberation is to consider the consequences of one's actions. And if one is a little philosophical and considers what are the consequences of claiming that the result belongs to me, then one may be a little reticent to hold on to them. So in the beginning, it may be a philosophical way in which one approaches one's work and carefully disentangles oneself from the result by considering each case and then stepping away from the result. Step away from the result and let it go. Offer the result to Krishna. Do your work for Krishna, not for some result for yourself. And see what happens. See what happens. It's good advice because it comes from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And when we practice it, we'll also experience a higher taste from doing that. So it may seem counterintuitive and it may seem difficult at first, but this is one of the practices of pure consciousness, is giving up the result to Krishna. Okay, so one who is attached to the result of his work is also the cause of the action. Thus he is the enjoyer or sufferer of the result of such actions. As far as prescribed duties are concerned, they can be fitted into 3 subdivisions, namely routine work, emergency work, and desired activities. Routine work performed as an obligation in terms of the scriptural injunctions, without desire for results, is action in the mode of goodness. Work with results becomes the cause of bondage. Therefore, such work is not auspicious. Everyone has his proprietary right in regard to prescribed duties, but should act without attachment to the result. Such disinterested obligatory duties doubtlessly lead one to the path of liberation. Arjuna was therefore advised by the Lord to fight as a matter of duty without attachment to the result. His non-participation in the battle is another side of attachment. Such attachment never leads one to the path of salvation. Any attachment, positive or negative, is cause for bondage. Inaction is sinful. Therefore, fighting as a matter of duty was the only auspicious path of salvation for Arjuna. So this is a practical application of Krishna's instructions in the Bhagavad Gita of how to maintain pure consciousness. And that is to work, but to surrender the results of your work to Krishna. This also includes when one's doing service, that one should also be careful to do service for service and not for some motivated reason. What are some motivated reasons that one might perform one's devotional practice? Use the microphone.
To get some material gains.
Well, now that's illegal. As it says in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st canto, 2nd chapter, please recite the verse which makes that unappealing and illegal. Shraddha? Huh? Who knows the verse? Okay, well that's a start. Go ahead and say it.
I don't remember the whole one. Kamasya nendriya priti.
Labo jiveta yavata
jivasya tata jigyasa nartu yasceha karma bhihi.
Okay, so that verse says what?
Those who we should not.
Life's desire should never be, right?
Life's desire should never be aimed at material gains, especially for those who are pursuing devotional service.
Yeah, so we're starting off on a high level because the Bhagavatam starts with this premise that you shouldn't work for dharma, artha, kama, moksha. It says the Bhagavatam rejects all these things, that life is for attaining any of these things. Dharma, artha, kama, moksha. It's a very high standard that we're beginning with. In fact, the Bhagavatam starts up where the Bhagavad Gita leaves off. Where does the Bhagavad Gita leave off? Sarva dharman parityaja mamekam sharanam braja aham tvam sarva papepyo mokshaishami masuchaha. Abandon your dharma and just surrender unto me. And then we go into the Bhagavatam, and Krishna and Sutta Goswami says, Dharma prochita kaitavo tra paramo nirmatsaranam satam. Says, any desire for dharma, artha, kama, moksha is cheating. It's a cheating process. And same thing in the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. The very beginning starts off with the process of devotional service as taught by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu completely rejects this cheating idea that one can get oneself situated in the material world through religious practice. From that comes sense gratification, and then ultimately one wants liberation. But it's beyond even that. Service for service. And there are ways in which one may perform devotional service and then expect something in return. One might want some recognition for one's service, in fact. And if one does that, then the service isn't satisfying to the self. Where does it say that in the Srimad Bhagavatam? It says the opposite. If one does service for service, then oneself becomes satisfied. What does it say?
Sarve punsa paro dharmo yato bhakti radhokshaje ahetuki apratihata ye atma suprasidati. Translation. For a person to get completely satisfied, that devotional service should be transcendental and unmotivated and unalloyed, I think.
Uninterrupted, right?
Uninterrupted,
Ahaituki
yeah.
apratiyata. Very good. So the ultimate advice, savai pumsam paro dharmo, the ultimate dharma for all human beings is to do service for service. Without any, you're not doing it for getting anything in return, and you don't stop it in between so you can do something else. And if you do that, then the soul is completely satisfied. That's something that one can look into, because everyone's looking for some satisfaction, and satisfaction, as we started, comes from consciousness. And the consciousness has to be pure, and therefore one must perform service for service, service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead without any motivation, We serve because that's our constitutional position, to serve. And if it remains uninterrupted, then the self becomes satisfied. But if I want something in return for it, I adulterate the consciousness of the activity. There's some motivation. I have an ulterior motive, and therefore it becomes tinged. And I won't feel satisfied. So this is, I think we're on to something here. Something that is not widely known. And that is that by uninterrupted, unmotivated service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one can completely satisfy the self. So again, one should not become unchaste by stopping the activities of pure consciousness. So one has to see, has to observe, what is my state of consciousness? What is my motivation for serving? And am I performing work and attaching myself to the result? If so, I'm adulterating my consciousness. I'm becoming unchaste to pure consciousness. If I'm doing some kind of service, but I have an ulterior motive for performing that service out of an idea, I have a condition that I want to be recognized for my service, for instance, then I won't get the result of the pure consciousness. So, we've heard about doing work without being attached to the result. We've also heard about how one should be observant of performing service without being attached to getting any fame or adoration from doing it. And if one does perform service with an ulterior motive, then the result won't be the same either. So Prabhupada points this out in the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita in a rather profound way. He talks about how the mission of his spiritual master unfolded. And that is that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who is teaching the tenets of Srimad Bhagavatam, that is pure service, service for service, established an organization. And at one point, he had sent a delegation to another country, to the UK, to spread Krishna consciousness. And the members of that delegation didn't get a result. In fact, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta invested a lot of the Gaudiya Math's money in that delegation, and they basically failed. They weren't able to make any results, any tangible results. So he called them back. And it was well known that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was not satisfied with what had taken place. So what was it that caused this failure? Well, Prabhupada writes about it in a purport in the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. And do I have the number of that? Let's try Adi Lila 12:12. That may be it. Danya Rashi Mape Jaiche Patna Sahite Paschate Patna Udhaya Samskara Karite. Paddy is mixed with straw at first, and one must fan it to separate the paddy from the straw. Prabhupada writes, this example given by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is very appropriate. In the case of the Gaudiya Math members, one can apply a similar process. There are many disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, but to judge who is actually his disciple To divide the useful from the useless, one must measure the activities of such disciples in executing the will of the spiritual master. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati tried his best to spread the cult of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to countries outside India. When he was present, he patronized the disciples to go outside India to preach the cult of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but they were unsuccessful because within their minds they were not actually serious about preaching his cult in foreign countries. They simply wanted to take credit for having gone to foreign lands and utilize this recognition in India by advertising themselves as repatriated preachers. So it's rather blunt, but so is the text itself, in which Kaviraj Goswami is pointing out that Advaita Acharya had 4 sons. 2 went one way and 2 went the other. There was an authorized way 2 sons went, and an unauthorized way the other 2 sons went. And there is a way in which one can deviate from pure consciousness by deliberately misinterpreting the instruction of the spiritual master and going one's own way. In fact, it's described how even after the spiritual master leaves, a disciple can develop the enjoying mentality of trying to take the assets of the spiritual master. And Prabhupada points out that this happened in the case of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and he says that some people ended up with the properties, which are actually useless, and others ended up with the actual mission. And it depends on one's motivation within one's mind. If one's thinking that, I want something from this, I want some comfort, I want some property, I want some gain from the mission of the spiritual master, then one may end up with that. And it's compared in this verse to when you separate the chaff from the actual rice grains. The chaff is practically useless, although nowadays they sell it in health food stores as a means of roughage. California might be worth a little something. But generally we consider you separated it out, the grain is what's important, and the chaff is separated, and it's not important, it's useless. And one actually gets the real thing if one is not motivated, and one thinks, how can I sincerely serve the mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and of my spiritual master? And Prabhupada mentioned when he was asked about succession in the Krishna consciousness movement, because that was a big issue, it always is. How will the Krishna consciousness movement go on? Who will represent you after you leave? I mean, that's a very difficult thing. I mean, one thing is that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur set up a system before he left in which he said, I want a GBC. He called it a governing body commission. But right after he left, the devotees, instead of establishing a GBC, put forward their own acharyas, said this one will actually be the head of the organization, someone else said this one will be, and then they started a fight. And they fought amongst themselves instead of doing what the spiritual master asked. And so there was a great difficulty about that. And now my point, what track was I on? What? Yeah, you get the real thing. Yeah, and so instead of trying to follow the order of the spiritual master, so then I was going to succession. So then Prabhupada mentioned when he was asked about succession, he also followed the order of a spiritual master. Because the Gaudiya Math didn't work out, he went on to follow whatever his spiritual master had recommended. For instance, you'll notice that ISKCON has a GBC. And why does it have one? Because Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, establish a GBC. The Gaudiya Math didn't do it. So when Prabhupada, by force, because there was no organization to work with, started his own preaching, he caught up to all of the orders of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. First of all, printing books and distributing them profusely. He focused on that because that's what his spiritual master had asked him to do. And he also focused on developing a governing body commission, which has become the glue to hold together an international organization, which is not easy to do. It's not easy to do, but it's going on because there is this following of what Srila Prabhupada said to do, and devotees are sincerely trying to do it. And then the other point I was getting to was when Prabhupada was asked about succession, who will be able to, after you, be able to, for instance, initiate devotees. Prabhupada said in the conversation that one who understands the mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, or he said one who understands the mission of his spiritual master, which is the same as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's, that person will become a spiritual master. So it's a matter of having a very chaste consciousness, saying that I'm going to follow the order of my spiritual master, follow the order of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu without ulterior motives. That was what Prabhupada claimed gave him the power. The power came through him to spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. Otherwise, if one has an ulterior motive and thinks that I'll keep it for myself, I'll become glorified by doing this, then the current does not come through. So this is the power of pure consciousness, which requires that one not take credit. And one might think, well, what's in it for me then? Well, what's in it for us is unlimited happiness by surrendering to the will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and becoming His surrendered servant. Within that, there is unlimited happiness in one's relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Otherwise, one is precluded from that deep relationship with the Supreme Lord, minus the surrender. So, maintaining that pure consciousness, no matter what one's service is the objective of the process of Krishna consciousness. To not give up that pure consciousness, not surrender it to and become unchaste in consciousness. Even if one is given the service of being a servant leader, one should also maintain pure consciousness. Example? If one, for instance, Prabhupada gives this example about writing, one may become an author, and one might think, now I'll become famous by becoming an author. And then Prabhupada writes, it is by the mercy of all these Vaishnavas and Gurus that I attempt to write. And now see, I'll start at the beginning of the letter. He says, regarding writing, I may quote from the Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Leela 9th chapter, the blueprint of which I have just received from New York. He says, it is by the mercy of all these Vaishnavas and Gurus that I attempt to write about the pastimes and qualities of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Whether I know or know not, it is for self-purification that I write this book. Who said that? Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. Prabhupada goes on to say, the purport is that for transcendental writing, one must be an authorized Vaishnav and should write to purify oneself, not for credit. It may or may not be published, but one who is actually sincere in writing, all his ambitions will be fulfilled. That's pretty nice. If one maintains pure consciousness, all of one's ambitions will be fulfilled. And if one gives up that pure consciousness, which we're being advised not to do, don't surrender the pure consciousness to these other taints, which are trying to attach oneself to the fruits of one's work, working for some ulterior motive, one's own purpose, then one's ambitions will not be fulfilled. You may be ambitious, but you won't get what you want. But if you surrender to Krishna and simply give yourself in pure service, and the example here has been given, say if you write something for Krishna, you write for self-purification. And if it's published, fine. And if it's not published, I wrote it, I got purified. And this can be applied in any of one's services. Whatever service one does, one may be on one's way to Switzerland, for example. with a duty to help spread the book distribution movement. And if one goes there with this feeling that I'm going as an instrument, somehow or other I'm in this situation and I'm going as an instrument and I'm going for my own self-purification and I'll do what I can and Krishna can work through me, I'll simply sincerely try to do my duty, then there's all success. There can be no anomaly with it when one maintains that pure state of consciousness. Even obstacles will become purifying. And if one goes out for book distribution, wherever one goes, I've found that the unassailable default position for promoting book distribution is self-purification. Nobody can argue with that. People can say so many other things about book distribution, but if you Hare Krishna. But if you start with that premise, and that is, why are we doing this? For self-purification. So, oh, okay, that sounds okay, and it is okay, and that's the basis for every service that we do. If we maintain that, that's pure consciousness. And we have to be observant to see, am I taking any other motive? Is any other motive entering within? These are called anartas, unwanted things, that actually disturb the frequency through which I can connect to Krishna out of loving service. I surrender the results. I surrender even the subtle advantage that I did this. I was the one who did it. No, you give all credit. And Prabhupada continually, in fact, Trivikram Maharaj tells one story about when he was Prabhupada's servant. And Prabhupada had been preaching one night, and he soundly defeated some scientist with logic. And then afterwards, when Trivikram Maharaj was giving Prabhupada a massage, he was imagining, because when he was in the Navy, he used to be a boxer, Trivikram Maharaj, and he was thinking of Prabhupada as a heavyweight fighter, and he was massaging him just like they do after a fight. And he was thinking, I got the champ right here. And he just knocked somebody out. And he was going on glorifying Prabhupada, that you're so expert and the way you defeated this person. And Prabhupada slapped his hand on the mat that he was sitting on. He said, no, it is the mercy of my Guru Maharaj. He passed up the credit. Wouldn't take it. Same thing happened when I went with a group of devotees to meet Prabhupada in 1973. Keshav Bharti Maharaj was there, and the temple president began to glorify him as doing very well on book distribution. And then Keshav Bharti Maharaj interrupted, and he started to glorify Prabhupada, and then Prabhupada interrupted him and said, no, it is all the mercy of my Guru Maharaj. And you'll notice this over and over again, that Prabhupada passes up the credit, and he gives it to his Guru Maharaj. This is the culture of maintaining this pure consciousness and not taking it for oneself. So in writing, just as given an example, the Goswamis wrote for self-purification, and that's what they claimed, that they're the most fallen, they're simply doing their duty, as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked them. And also, one might find oneself in the position of a leader, a teacher. So Srila Prabhupada talks about this. And he says in a letter, my dear children, talking to his disciples, please accept my blessings. I am so much pleased with your kind, affectionate words on the occasion of my birthday anniversary on the Nandotsava day this year, 1972. My Guru Maharaj wanted me to spread this Krishna consciousness movement in Western world, and you are all helping me in this attempt. My spiritual master knew it, that alone I could not do this great work. Therefore, he has kindly sent you all to help me in this task. I accept you, therefore, as representatives of my Guru Maharaj, playing as my affectionate disciples. It is said that the child is the father of man. Kindly, therefore, continue your help in this great task and act as my young father and mother in my old age. I am your ever well-wisher. So, again, although Prabhupada had the unassailable position due to his spiritual stature and also his, he was at the age of being the grandfather, a grandfatherly figure, even from an ordinary point of view. But when his young disciples came, he didn't claim proprietorship over them. Rather, he claimed that they were representatives of his Guru Maharaj. And in that sense, he was saying, internally, he's accepting that actually, I'm your servant, the servant leader. In all circumstances, whether one's writing about Krishna, whether one's serving in a position of leadership, or whether one's doing some menial service, one should maintain the pure consciousness that connects one to Krishna. Hridayananda Maharaj was telling us a story about how when he had become a sannyasi and he had been in Prabhupada's room, because once one had come up to a certain level, one had more access to be with Prabhupada. And one evening, Prabhupada was very much appreciating his sincere preaching efforts. So Hridayananda Maharaj said when he went away, he was becoming, he was considering, oh, Prabhupada really likes my service and so forth. And he thought, I'll go back tomorrow and get a little bit more encouragement. And he went back with a slightly different mentality than he had the first time. And he said that Prabhupada immediately detected it. And at the same time as he went into the room, there was a young devotee woman who was cleaning the room very sincerely, conscientiously. And he said Prabhupada completely ignored him as he came in and gave his full attention to this devotee and his realization was at that very moment, that devotee was in pure consciousness because she was simply, sincerely thinking how to clean the room. And he had come thinking, how will I get maybe just a little bit more of this appreciation from my spiritual master? Instead of, it is such a subtle thing, instead of coming in and thinking, how can I serve? What is my position to serve? Thinking, even subtly, let me get a little more encouragement for my position and so forth. And so on a very subtle frequency, Srila Prabhupada could understand that. He gave all the attention to the menial servant in the room. So at every level, whatever it is, one should not give up the pure consciousness of service for service. And this is the great secret that is the Srimad Bhagavatam, that nobody knows. Everyone's thinking, I need to protect my position. I need to maintain my status quo, myself here in the material world. But the devotee understands and cultivates this relationship of surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, not just physically, but also psychologically. And as one becomes the true servant internally, thinking that I am simply the servant of the servant, I claim no proprietorship over my service or the result in any way, then one actually begins to connect through consciousness to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because this is the platform through which one can actually perceive the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Otherwise, there's an obstruction. Otherwise, if I have a subtle motive within my mind, Krishna does not reveal himself. Nor does one become privy to the true import of Vedic knowledge. Therefore, the Shastra says, Yasya Devi para bhaktir yata Devi tatagaro tasyaite katitahyarta prakashanti mahatmanaha. Only unto one who has this implicit faith and surrender to the spiritual master and to Krishna are all the imports of Vedic knowledge automatically and simultaneously revealed through the medium of pure consciousness. Sattvam Vishuddham Vasudeva Shabditam. Only on this platform of consciousness where one is freed from the burden of unchaste consciousness can one experience the Supreme Personality of Godhead sincerely. So I'm going to read again in the purport this area that I'm specifically focusing on tonight. One should not become unchaste by stopping the activities of pure consciousness. Such an important statement because so many of the forces from our own senses and mind request us to give up the activities of pure consciousness. We may even get association in the world which requests us to give up the activities of pure consciousness. But here we can make our stand. In all circumstances, wherever I go and whomever I meet, I should not become unchaste by stopping the activities of pure consciousness. This is your prerogative, the prerogative of every soul in this world, and especially those who have entered into the authorized process of devotional service, is to at all costs maintain pure consciousness and not give it up for any reason. This means chaste consciousness. Don't surrender it for any reason or for any other person. We are only attached to the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Srila Prabhupada continues, if the activities of pure consciousness are stopped, certainly the conscious living force will be otherwise engaged, because unless engaged in the consciousness, the consciousness has no standing. And therefore we have this motto, and that is, keep the transcendental vibration going. That's one of the other great secrets of life, because it may seem that one comes up short in many circumstances in this life because of the multiple distractions that one has to face, the bidimensional universe that we live in. How is it bidimensional? We have a physical body, but we are metaphysical entities. We're beyond matter. But somehow or other, we've become implicated in the material world. And there's a balance that goes on between maintaining our physical existence and going on with our devotional service. And therefore, there are times at which one may experience some worldliness because one hasn't come to the full point of Krishna consciousness. One hasn't reached a complete maturity. There are ways in which one becomes overwhelmed by worldliness. But Krishna says, don't despair and don't give up. Api chet sudaracharo bhajate mam ananyabhak sadureva samantavya samyag vyavasito hisaha. Krishna says it himself, that even if someone succumbs to worldliness while they're on the path of pure consciousness, they should not be disparaged by anybody. And one should also not disparage oneself to the point that one becomes pathologically depressed. One should go on with the process of devotional service and cultivation of pure consciousness. Pick oneself up and keep going forward. Reclaim one's right to maintain pure chaste consciousness. Claim your right to maintain pure consciousness. Nobody can tell you otherwise. In fact, in the Nectar Devotion, Srila Rupa Goswami quotes a verse, one of my favorite all-time verses, in which he says that it's the prerogative of anyone who wants to take a bath in the Triveni during the month of Magh to do so. Nobody can stop you. If you want to go down there in the fog and the rain and the cold and take your dip in the Triveni during the month of Magh, you have the perfect right to do so, and nobody can tell you not to. Nobody can stop you. So similarly, anyone who wants to can claim their right to maintain pure consciousness throughout this lifetime and to struggle for it in all circumstances, whatever circumstance one's in. And also, we should consider the fact that nobody comes into this world free from implication. Well, practically nobody. And therefore, and one should also consider the fact that by the slight touch of pure consciousness, or even the consideration that I will maintain pure consciousness throughout this lifetime, Krishna is so unlimitedly grateful to somebody who takes that path that even a second invested in that endeavor is never lost. Krishna says, Neha bikramanashosti pratyavayona vidyate swalpamapya siddharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. Even a tiny trace of endeavor for this pure consciousness in this lifetime, Krishna said, it's so valuable that that is never lost. That goes to one's eternal credit. What to speak of? And now Prabhupada mentions in the context of following the order of one's spiritual master, which is the equivalent to connecting to this pure consciousness. It's the rope that pulls one through all the whirlpools of material life, to hold on to that instruction that's coming through the disciplic succession through one's spiritual master. He says that even if you can't do it at the present time, if you consider, how can I do, how can I do, how can I do, and you keep praying and begging like that. Because think of Prabhupada's situation. He was against all odds. His spiritual master gave him an impossible instruction. In fact, to execute that instruction, Prabhupada went to Shantipur, to Advaitacharya's house. And he went there and begged. And he said, my spiritual master has given me an impossible instruction. I mean, think about it. Now it seems like, yeah, of course he spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. But think about the circumstances. He had no money. He was 70 years old. And his spiritual master said, spread Krishna consciousness in the West. And he had no facility. How are you supposed to do that? You have to say, how can I do? How can I do? How can I do? And that's what Prabhupada did. He connected to pure consciousness, pure sincerity. And he went to Shantipur, the place where Advaita Acharya had called Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to this world. I mean, how do you do that? How do you get the Supreme Lord to descend into the world? Unless you have a pure desire for him to appear. Most people don't want him to appear, because it'll interrupt their sense gratification. Most religious processes are superficial, because if God actually appears and said, I need a little service, say, not right now. Because, I got a car payment and I got this thing, soccer match with my daughter and all this kind of stuff. But Prabhupada in pure consciousness went and prayed at the place where Advaita Acharya had done the same thing and propitiated Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu with a sincere desire for him to hear pure consciousness. And Prabhupada had made the same kinds of sincere prayers that how can I do, how can I do, how can I do? And then he went off and tried. So Prabhupada says, if you cannot practically do, but you say, how can I do, how can I do, how can I do? He said, then the effect will be very powerful. But he said, what to speak of when you actually do it? What to speak of when you actually get the opportunity and you fully embrace it? What to speak of what happens then? It's unimaginable. This full commitment to pure consciousness, to the cause of unmotivated, uninterrupted devotional service. It's the most unstoppable force in the universe. Everything else can be curtailed, because when one has a motivation in this world, one can be coerced to back down because you have a vested interest in the material world. That's why Prahlad Maharaj was glorified so much. He was not afraid of any circumstance because he had no stake in the material world. He was completely surrendered to the Lord and was praying for his protection at all times. Even the demigods, when Nrsingadev came and was fighting with Hiranyakashipu, were afraid because they thought, now we've supported Nrsingadev, now what if he loses? Hiranyakashipu is really going to... And that's the problem in material life and impure consciousness. If I have a stake in the material world, if I keep a little something here, then I'm going to be afraid because I've got something to lose. So one should not surrender one's pure consciousness. One should maintain it at all costs. And in that way, one will be free from fear and assured of success in all circumstances, even if it appears that one's trying to progress against all odds in the material world. Pure consciousness always prevails. Sincerity always wins in the end. Om Tat Sat. Yes, some reflections.
Guru Maharaj, I missed a part of the beginning of the lecture, but I'm hoping I'm not asking for a repetition here. You are explaining to us about pure consciousness. My understanding is that pure consciousness is the ability to maintain a service for service attitude and to be able to have implicit faith and to be able to surrender completely to the Lord and spiritual master. So this pure consciousness is a state of mind, or is it a state of action?
It's both, actually. I mean, whatever state of mind we have will be translated into a state of action, ultimately, because we vote with our feet. And if we're holding some ulterior motive, we may go a different direction. Therefore, the very acts of sense gratification in this world indicate some kind of aversion, ultimately, that's built in to devotional service. Aversion to the Lord as the supreme controller.
But that goes away with time, right?
Yes,
as you said.
absolutely.
We stumble, fall, stand up.
Yeah, and we have to start from where we are. And Krishna encourages us. I try to bring in an encouraging verse in the Apichet Suracharo. Krishna says, even if you mess up, and you mess up really bad, it's just said if you're dedicated to pure consciousness, then you're good. You're okay. You keep going. Don't adulterate it. The other adulterations are mentioned in offenses against the chanting of the holy name. One of the adulterations to pure consciousness means that because this is so powerful, this process, therefore I'm entitled to certain kinds of liberties of enjoying the material world. Sins by... I can deviate from pure consciousness because I'll make up for it by the power of the holy name. That will purify my... I take advantage of it. Don't take advantage. If one sincerely can't do it and keeps trying, there's a difference. It's very subtle, but one has to observe that. That's part of the process, is to look and see, is it because I really can't do it, or I'm taking advantage of the fact that the holy name will purify me? And if one detects that entitlement mentality, one has to try to distance oneself from that as much as possible by regaining one's stature as a pure servant. Jeev Krishna Das e Bishwas Korleto Arduko Nai. Come back to this point. I'm simply a servant. I have no standing other than the fact that I'm the servant of the servant of the servant. This is a safe position. Samasritaye parapalava plavam mahat param punya yasho mararehe bhavam burir vatsa padam param padam 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 yadvi padam natesham. In this dangerous world where you're bound to make a misstep because the material world it's built in here, simply take shelter of Krishna's lotus feet in all circumstances. And don't take shelter of the false ego. Keep surrendering. And it's a moment-to-moment process. It's another way in which Maya can grab us by saying, okay, now you're advanced, so now you can take it easy. Opens the door to Maya, lets her in, and then justification invites her to stay. You open the door, come on in, and then I can justify it. That's another thing, justification. And I keep saying, well, I need this because, people mistreated me. It's not me, it's the GBC. It's not me, it's like, it's somebody else. But in any self-help, any self-respecting self-help program, you have to start by taking full responsibility and say, it's me, and I messed up, and I live to be corrected, and I'm going to take a sincere, honest position. And as soon as one does, Chernadapi sunichena toror iva suhishnuna. Amanina manadena kirtaniya sadhari comes and takes shelter of this position over and over again, that I'm simply a straw in the street. I'm insignificant. Then, actually, paradoxically, one has some stature. And the moment I claim something through entitlement, the minute in that very instant, one loses one's spiritual stature. Just like that. So from moment to moment, Kaviraj Goswami says, wear this around your neck, because it's so easy to lose it again and think, now I'm entitled, right? It's like, oops, you just lost it. Come back to the surrender continually. Somebody else? Yes.
Maharaj, you were mentioning that Prabhupada was thinking, how can I? And then he went to Advaita Prabhu's place to pray for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to come descend on this earth. And whenever I hit that point, like there was a time that I could tell my chanting is not good. So I consulted with my sister and I was like, my chanting is not good at all. I'm just doing it because I have to finish my rounds. I took a vow. So she just said, just pray to Krishna. That really worked. Then every time I slip and I feel my chanting is slipping, I just surrender and I go, I pray to you, Lord, please help my chanting better. And it really works.
Yeah, that's good advice. And even getting oneself to pray can sometimes be a slog through the marshes of material consciousness. But you have to start somewhere. And prayer is very powerful. Please help me. Yeah. Pass it back to Sudeep. Yeah.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for the wonderful class. When you were mentioning about the verse Apichet Suduracharo, and mentioning about that even for some reason if you fall down, what came to me was in Mayapur when His Grace Satyadev Prabhu gave a class, and he mentioned about what Prabhupada had once mentioned, that devotional service is, practicing devotional service is like learning to walk the first time. Even if you stumble or you fall down, you pick yourself up and continue on the road. So that just occurred to me, so I thought I'd share.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hansapriya?
Actually, I was meditating on the word that you used actually last class about the attention span. And that's much better than a time management.
Managing your attention.
And managing your attention.
Yeah. Tension management.
And I noticed that I work at Adobe, and from to Adobe, I take the same route from last 4 years. And there's this huge, I just happened to stop in the traffic, and for the first time, I noticed this large tree. And all this time, I was not noticing. And at that time, something was really bothering me, and I was riding a roller coaster of this unchaste consciousness, and I was thinking how much that's weighing me down, that I'm not even able to see what's around me, and how much all this time I didn't even notice, even the things are right in front of you. So I was just thinking, where do I want to put my attention to? So things that weighs me down, or things which is here, and just observe it and find which is right for me to even notice or acknowledge it, or help me to move forward and not drag me down. So
nice point. And how does one maintain that strength to do that? Because it's one thing to talk about it, but another thing to actually maintain any discipline in this world. One very practical way in which to maintain the determination to stay in pure consciousness is to every day read from Srila Prabhupada's books for a set amount of time. You actually have to sit with the books and read them carefully. And because the Bhagavatam and what Prabhupada's for instance, reading the Bhagavatam, because the verses of the Bhagavatam and Prabhupada's commentary on the Bhagavatam are on the transcendental platform, if you take the time to expose yourself, or so I say, drink in, imbibe what's written there, just drink it in. Let it go into your intelligence. Let it go into your mind. Consider what's being said. Then you actually fortify your intelligence. You purify the mind by taking that in. For instance, this morning I sat down. There's so many different decisions, challenges, and things like that I had to make today. And how would I do that without anxiety? How would I do it without surrendering to the depths of despair in the material world, which are always there knocking at one's door? And the answer was that I sat down and read Bhagavatam. I was on the 7th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and of all people I heard from today, it was Hiranyakashipu. And after Hiranyakashipu instructed his demoniac followers to ruin the world, said, break all the bridges, ruin all the wells, chop down all the trees and everything, I was thinking, God, that sounds familiar. There's people actually doing that today. It resembles what happens in a lot of these countries where people go around on a rampage just killing everybody and burning everything. And I was thinking, this is always going on in the material world. That's one thing I could relate to, because there's a way in which one may despair that the material world is so hellish. It's like, how can I even tolerate it? And you read in the Bhagavatam that this is always going on. And life goes on. That was one thing. The second thing was, after Hiranyaka was killed, Hiranyakashipu, because he's an excellent politician, went to his family to appease them, and he began speaking Atma-tattva Gyan. And he told them, look the soul's eternal, it can't be killed. So don't worry. And he said, this is a temporary situation we've come into, just like when you go into a place to drink cold water or in a restaurant, you meet a few people, you make friends for a few minutes, and you leave. That's what our family is. It's not a big deal. And then he told the story of Suyagya, who was a great king, and he died on the battlefield, and his wives were so attached to him that they were holding on to his body even past the time when he should be cremated. So Yamaraj made a special exception to set an example, and he came as a little boy, and he said, what are you all doing here? Why are you crying? And he said, our husband, the king, is dead. And he said, no, he's same eyes, same hands, everything is still there. How you say he's gone? They say, you don't understand. He said, no, you don't understand. You never saw him before. And when you start hearing these things, it makes sense. When people die and you take the body through the streets and everyone sings Ram Nam Satya Hai, everyone's sober for a few days and goes, oh, I get it. Actually, this is true. It's in the Bhagavad Gita. It's true. It's in the Bhagavatam. Better be preemptive. Better to read it every day. Better to stay in pure consciousness by reading the Bhagavatam every day. Therefore it says, Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. You have to do this. You have to worship this sound vibration all the time. And if you don't do it all the time, because you're too busy, at least do it every day. And there's a science to it. If you chant Hare Krishna with attention, and you read the Bhagavatam with attention, your intelligence becomes fortified, and you can actually get through one more day. And that's all that's being asked. Just one more day. Compartmentalize, say, if I get through this one day in Krishna consciousness, that's a great victory. Ayur varati vaipum sam. The sun's going over. For all those who aren't hearing chanting, sun's going over. Ha ha ha, I'm taking away your life. But for those who are engaged in hearing and chanting, it goes, okay, you keep doing what you're doing. You're okay. And so this is our process. Every single day we have to compartmentalize and say, if I can get through this one day in Krishna consciousness, then it's a big success. Because it's a troublesome place. It's a troublesome place, the material world. It just doesn't jive with our nature. It's not natural. Don't manage your expectations. Don't think that you're going to find some harmony here in Silicon Valley. It's not set up for that. Nowhere in the material world. Abrahma bhuvana loka punar avartino arjuna. Mamupeta tukonteya punar janmana vidite. There's a lot of heavy stuff going on in this universe. And this is not your place to settle down and enjoy. You got another place to go, and you got the path to do it. So just stay on it, stay in pure consciousness, and tolerate the anomalies that come along with the material life, one day at a time. We have something came in from the internet.
So this is Nagar Kirtan Prabhu from Bombay, India.
Nagar Kirtan, you're kidding me.
Yeah,
Our Nagar Kirtan?
Yes, our Nagar Kirtan. He was actually asking since morning, like, how do I,
Is he online right now?
He's on Facebook, Facebook,
Okay.
and he's sending texts through that. Yeah.
Everyone give a big Hari Bol to Nagar Kirtan. Thanks, Nagar. All right, let's hear what he's got to say.
So, so you had mentioned that we should keep talking about transcendental subjects so that we do not misuse our power of speech and degrade our consciousness. So the question is, so does that mean that it is okay to try to be Krishna conscious simply for the reason of getting out of Maya?
Yeah, sure. Why not? Give it a shot. Yes, we should be aware of the fact that we're in a precarious situation and that it matters how we interact with the material energy and that we can be easily tripped up. And one of the ways in which we stay in this pure consciousness is by minding our speech. That's why Krishna mentions in the 17th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita that one should practice austerities of speech. Because by doing so, your tongue is your rudder. And the way you speak in this world will affect your consciousness. And so yes, you should be aware of the fact that I'm in a precarious situation, and if I let my tongue run off in the wrong direction, I'll become implicated. You got to be careful what you say. What else?
And then Maharaj, on you had mentioned never surrender your pure consciousness. So I was thinking about that Dhautatma Purusha Krishna verse where it says that by doing pure devotional service, when your consciousness gets purified, then the person doesn't want to leave Krishna because he feels very much satisfied there. Just as a person who returns home after a troublesome
That's
journey.
right. Yeah. Yes. We should come to cherish being in pure consciousness. And we should feel reticent about mixing with the material world. That's why there's so many instructions in the Shastra about don't mix with worldly people. Why? Because they blab all the time about stuff that is discordant to one's consciousness. Unless you're doing service there, it becomes a disturbance to the consciousness. So it says, Jana Sangas Jalolyam Cha. Don't mix with worldly minded people because they talk about stuff that's disturbing to the consciousness. And even in the association in the society of devotees, you may try to search out those devotees who are very much dedicated to careful speech, talking Krishna Katha and so forth, and are careful about what they say. Because you can mix with varieties of devotees at different levels, and you can sit and talk prajalpa with devotees. That's possible. What's the latest scandal? There's several to pick from right now. And you can get into that kind of consciousness, or you can take the advice of the Srimad Bhagavatam and try to enter into pure Krishna Katha. Not that there's no scope for talking about anything in the world, and that can't also be Krishna conscious. But one has to, again, be careful to maintain that realm of pure consciousness. And if you see about speech, how it's affecting you, and hearing other people's speech, then you have to be careful. Okay, 2 more. We have Radhakripa, and then we have SKP. And I have another couple points I have to make on camera before I'm done, because it's something that has to be recorded. So give me about 10 minutes to do that. Yeah.
It's Maharaj. I just wanted to share, today I went to an exhibition and I met a gentleman with the name Radha Krishna, and I totally forgot that I am here for, office work or whatever it is. and I invariably told him, I said, I really love your name. I wish my name was that. And then I quickly showed my phone. I said, this is Radha, right? And then I realized what I'm talking to, whom I'm saying this thing, right? This is an exhibition. But slowly I felt what you were saying. I was correlating, when you're whole day you're talking to the people, meeting people, it just seems like, what is going on here? And what I did, I don't know why it had happened, just thought to share.
But your name's Radhakripa. That's pretty good too, right? Maybe even better. Okay, SKP?
The self-purification you mentioned yesterday and or last class and this class also, Prabhu, that when we went out on book distribution, that purification we can see. I think 2 weeks before myself and Malini Mataji and few devotees went out, and we knocked many doors for Chaitanya Charitamrita. They didn't open. As soon as we knock one door, and he's Damodar Prabhu friend. So he asked him to come in. Oh, I'm Deepak's friend. I said, okay, Chaitanya Charitamrita done. I was thinking in my mind like that. But he is very intellectual. He is asking questions and, all many arguments with us. And finally, it's thought, as soon as we in a comfortable position that, I'm thinking the set is done, but it's not the case. Then finally he said, because of all devotees sense, or he finally accepted Prabhu, and he said, on one condition I'll accept, that every week one of your guys should call me and ask me how many pages you read. Then I'll take it. So then we are doing it. We are sending him a text message. Why I told this, because we should not never think that as soon as we think the book is done, it never happens.
Yeah, and that's one of the advantages of going out into the world and trying to teach Krishna consciousness to others. As Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, that the Chid Sharira, the spiritual body, is nourished by Chid Rakta, which is spiritual blood. And you get this spiritual blood by going out to teach Krishna consciousness to others and being misunderstood, neglected, and opposed. And because of that, your spiritual blood thickens in your spiritual body grows. So I have a couple points to make, because I got a message today that there's a special day coming up to celebrate the BBT. And in the, I better make this good, because Ramananda, you're filming this? I'm going to open your book. He has to take this to Switzerland, so this is for SKP. Do you mind if I open it? It's too late now, it's half open. I wrote a chapter in this book. The title of the book is Our Family Business. And in this chapter, in the book, there's a chapter called Our Family Business. And in this chapter, I'd like to make a couple of points. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Okay, a couple points are that Srila Prabhupada had a very specific way in which he devised his plan to spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. And it should be known and passed down for posterity's sake that he said that I have hatched a transcendental plot through which we would have all success in the Krishna consciousness movement. And he wrote, if you simply push on this one activity of distributing my books, your all success will be there. I've hatched this transcendental plot for getting money by selling my books. And if we stick only to this plan and use our brain for selling books, there will easily be sufficient money. There are many aspects to this plan which are extremely transcendental. First of all, there's a way in which that while one's selling transcendental books, one thinks of Krishna, and Prabhupada mentioned this many times. One's also engaged in talking to people about an object that is that requires that one explain something transcendental to people, and so forth. So the very act of distributing books regulates the propensity in business to fly off into different aspects of business just to make more money. And that has been a problem over the years, that devotees have started off by selling books and then thought, well, I can make more profit selling something else. And that has caused problems in certain areas, because when you go out to sell a book, you're selling Krishna's book, and you have to think about Krishna, and you have to explain yourself. Yes, sir, why are you here showing me this book? And you have to dig deep. There's a lot of self-purification in that activity. But when you sell other things, you can devise so many other means of selling and completely bypass the aspect of explaining Krishna. Important also is that although Prabhupada was not so much in favor of starting all kinds of businesses, because business itself can become troublesome, not that he completely neglected business, but he encouraged anybody who started business in Krishna consciousness to make sure that they were using the proceeds to help promote the outreach all over the world. But when it comes to the BBT, Prabhupada was very specific in forming the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust as an entity that would assist ISKCON in spreading Krishna consciousness all over the world, and that would be a viable enterprise. That means that the money that would come in from the book sales would be sufficient to keep the business going. And therefore, at certain intervals, when devotees got inventive and they wanted to print books outside the BBT, Prabhupada specifically wrote to them and said, don't do that. Centralize this and keep the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust a viable enterprise, and don't cannibalize it by trying to print books for a cheaper price somewhere else and then selling them outside the BBT. This was his direct instruction. He emphasized that, and he also had a formula which was specifically that when a book was sold, that 50% of the proceeds would go to print more books, and the other 50% would go to build temples. This was his transcendental plot, and it worked marvelously. Mayapur, Vrindavan, Bombay and dozens of other projects, temples, and similar projects, outreach projects like the Bhaktivedanta Institute, Radha Damodar Bus Program, and so forth, which are the genesis of the worldwide outreach that started in the 1970s, all came primarily from monies realized through distribution of books. The sale of books, which was then divided 50% for printing books and 50% for starting temples. Therefore, to continue Prabhupada's legacy and the very engine which supports the Krishna consciousness movement, both spiritually through consciousness and financially, we have to be careful to maintain our dedication to the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust and not try to bypass the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust and print books elsewhere or buy books elsewhere. So this is an important point, to keep this a viable enterprise. It is Prabhupada's institution, and it's a sacred institution. And just by the way, institution means the way in which one can transmit culture across time and geography. And it just so happens in Gaudiya Vaishnavism that the book is the primary means through which we transmit the culture of Gaudiya Vaishnavism across time and culture. And therefore, this is a very central part of our entire movement of Krishna consciousness, to maintain the books. And the BBT, or the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust, is forever Prabhupada's business. It's his sacred trust that he made to maintain the Krishna consciousness movement and spread it all over the world. So one will do well to dedicate oneself to the BBT, educate oneself about the importance of the BBT, which one can read about in this book in the chapter called Our Family Business, which also includes the original trust document that Prabhupada wrote up to establish the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. And now we have the opportunity, and nobody can stop us, to stand up and dance before the deity. One of the devotional items mentioned in the Nectar of Devotion by Rupa Goswami, just simply by singing before the deity. And if one claps one's hands before the deity, then all the birds of sinful activity simply fly away. So we'll put all the asans away, and we'll roll up the rugs, and we'll make space for dancing and singing. Thank you very much to everybody who joined us online tonight. It was such a wonderful experience having us all together in one place. Go Premanande Haribo.